All right, hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy. My voice is about to blow out at any moment. So we'll see how this show goes. Not feeling too good for some reason. So we're going to be kicking off. Matt, why don't you hit us up with high tempo? You can go ahead.
This is just we've been on the show, been pretty high on the XFL. I don't know if you knew this. Did you know that the NFL's competing like minor league team or whatever, the AAF, was having a live draft tonight?
No, I did not.
Did you know that? Until a couple minutes ago, I didn't either. The Alliance of American Football was having their protector pick quarterback draft in Las Vegas tonight. What the hell? Well, you're trying to push this as this new league, and I think to this point, I got to say, who's ever their marketing director needs fired, because you do it on a Tuesday night that nobody knows about. You announce it with teams that nobody knows about. There's no information being released about what's going on. It's just like a slow trickle of like, oh, by the way, like this is also happening. Why if this is something that you're serious about, why wouldn't this be, at bare minimum, one of the things that you would try to promote during your Sunday broadcast games? Hey, if you enjoy the NFL, maybe watch this other product that we're producing at the same time. Like, instead of treating it like the stepchild that nobody wants.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I hate the fact that I think that they played this past spring and the games were not televised. So I understand from like a recruiting point, or coaches wanting to get film on these guys, they don't want the spectacle, but don't promote it like it's a competitor to the XFL. If you're going to go ahead and do things like this, hide your draft, not show the actual games, people just want football. I mean, how many people tune in, how many people attend these college football spring games, which are just practices? And then you're going to go ahead and put a product out and then no one's allowed to watch it? It just doesn't make sense. And getting into the football season, getting ready, I would be excited if the XFL, it doesn't kick off this year or next year, right? It's the year after,
I think.
So I'm looking forward to it. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll definitely keep you updated. If you follow the show, we're definitely football first. So always going to go ahead and get that in. Continuing with football, my high tempo is unfortunate injuries today. The quarterback for UCF, and I believe holidays mess up my timeline, so I never remember what notes went to what show, so I don't remember what we talked about last week. But Alex Smith broke his leg, both bones, almost a Joe Theismann injury, and I believe we mentioned it last week. UCF, undefeated, haven't lost a game in 2 years. Their quarterback goes down. Milton, I believe his name was.
Yeah, Mackenzie
Milton. And the reason I was hesitant to say that is Michigan has a backup quarterback named Milton, so I didn't want to mess it up. But he goes down, horrible leg injury. News comes out today that he has nerve damage. It wasn't a complete loss of nerve, which would have been a brutal injury. So he's going to have a tough recovery, so we're just wishing him well. And the first thing they reportedly said whenever he came to in the hospital was, what's the score of the game? So you feel bad for a kid that loves football that much whenever he is going under the knife. And I know we've talked about on the show, Michigan had a lineman that went through the same thing. This injury is so severe, they didn't know if he was going to lose his leg or part of his leg. And just
a big part of that, because I did look some stuff up on that. They were able to restore blood flow to the nerves, so all that stuff is intact and everything's okay with that. And I guess the next step in this process is now trying to get him scheduled for surgery on his knee. So at some point he'll have to clean up all the extra damage.
Yeah, that's what I was going to follow up with. he's still not even halfway through it. So definitely following along with a player that did it at Michigan. I can't remember if it was part of that All or Nothing documentary that Amazon put up, his injury. But in the same vein, you never want to see a kid get hurt, and especially not something like this. Luckily, it looks like the doctors were the same as in the Newsome injury, where they were able to treat it effectively and take care of it, get the blood flowing, and you're not going to have any hopefully long-term lasting issue walking around, because you don't want to see a 20-year-old kid hobbling for the rest of his life. So big shout out to the UCF doctors on that for getting that done. It's just it seems weird that this happens this severe multiple times that I've seen over the past couple years. So definitely hate to see that. So I'm going to go ahead and get something a little bit more positive, a little off the cuff this week, bringing up hunting season. I don't think we talked about this last year, but deer season started, I believe, was it yesterday? For most of Pennsylvania. And a big thing. A lot of people get out of school. Definitely a sport. And I love going out. I haven't actually been able to go hunting for quite a few years now. So I definitely need to get into the sport more and getting out there. Living in the South now, the temperature is a little bit different. It's a little bit warmer down here. We can go archery hunting in the fall, and my preferred outfit of sweats and a sweatshirt is comfortable wear. And that, I think that's actually the quietest gear. If you look at what ninjas wore, they wore some other like cotton cloth thing. You're not wearing some Christmas Story winter coat where you can barely move and you're ruffling to get into your tree stand, and then you're sitting down hoping that your toes don't go numb. So Matt, you went out. What was your experience like today? Anything like that?
Oh no! Let me tell you, I'm not. I follow directly in the line of my dad, who says if I'm having to take days off work, or if it counts as vacation time, then I'm doing it the right way and I'm doing it in luxury. So I was in my enclosed tree stand. It was nice. It was warm. It was comfortable. Had a nice 6-point come down and offer himself up to me. Had a nice shot at it. 1 shot, 1 kill. Actually, the deer even did a nice job of running about 125 yards towards the vehicle. So it was less of a drag out. So it was a very, very nice way to end the hunt this afternoon. I was very happy.
Very cool. And I just want to get on the record, you are going to be giving me some of that deer jerky you're going to make, correct?
Absolutely.
Definitely love to hear it. And well, good luck to all the other hunters out there. Just wanted to add it into the show. Congrats, Matty B, on your 6-point. And just a little bit extra. You know, football season's wrapping up. Most high school players, high school coaches, I know we got some to listen. Take a break. Get out there. Hunting's a nice, relaxing sport. And same with fishing. Get outdoors. Don't cram up in front of the TV all winter watching football, even though we know we love to do it.
I tell you what, though, you make a great point with that. And I know growing up, there was always like I never understood why like a lot of the adults that we knew were really high on hunting and fishing. And I think one of the things that kind of as a youngster you look at and like, what do you have to get away from? You never really understand it, but as you get into work and you get into some of that stuff, it is really therapeutic to be out in the woods or to be out, somewhere fishing and getting out and getting back to nature. So I do think that there's a lot of positive benefits of just getting back out and just relaxing. So I definitely think more people should take advantage of it.
And I'll even take it a step further, just getting outdoors and cutting off some of the technology stuff. Like I've spent a good bit of my fall doing hurricane cleanup, chopping wood, trying to remove trees that got knocked down, and I'll say most relaxing way to spend a weekend. Just outdoors, not worrying about is my phone ringing, did I get an email, that type of stuff. So always good to unwind every once in a while. Let's get into our Steel City update. Penguins kind of battling back here. Not 100% sure how I feel about them right now. Last 10 was a perfect. Or wait, hold on a second. Last 10, still 3-5-2. They won the last game over Columbus, which you know that we hate those guys. So that's always good to see. Tied right now with Winnipeg, at least whenever I took notes for the show. So I don't know if anyone scored through there.
Yep, still 2-2.
So 3 games out of the wild card. I just don't know what has to happen on defense to get a more consistent play. But I did want to mention Carolina down here. I went to see 2 Hurricanes games over the Thanksgiving holiday, and they're how many points ahead of Pittsburgh? 2 points ahead of Pittsburgh. Won both games that I went to see, and very cool to get into see a team that has struggled over the past put together some good games in a row and get a few wins because they seem to be playing well. And I know it's going to be a big boom to the area down here to have it's only professional sports franchise in Raleigh. So I'll always like to see them doing well. And Pittsburgh and Carolina definitely have ties with the GM transfer over, getting a few cups with Pittsburgh. So cool to see some live hockey. I haven't made it to see the Penguins live this year, but I did get out to see some Hurricanes games. Matt, you have anything you want to add on hockey, or you can just throw in baseball at this point because I don't have anything for the Pirates?
No, they don't really have too much for baseball. I know they're starting to try to make some offers, I believe, for baseball, and it's kind of tough to follow the Pirates when they're not putting any bids out there. You're not even hearing them trying to acquire talent. As far as the stuff with the Penguins, I think that the talent's there. I mean, it's just a matter of just getting the lines organized like we've been talking about. And I think that it's coming along. I think where they're at is they're at a transition point within the franchise of trying to figure out how much do you have to cut away to maintain the success that you're at. Because there is maybe a little bit of complacency or a little bit of guys that don't have that competitive edge that you're trying to figure out, well, how much do we need to we still have talent, but are we in full rebuild yet? I don't think so. But how much do you need to change or trade away to be competitive?
Yeah, and you're right. Talent is there. Seeding does not matter in hockey. It's not like basketball where an 8 seed winning a round is rare. 8 seeds can go all the way, similar to football. And you just need to make the playoffs. That's always been my motto. Make the playoffs. It's all about matchups in the playoffs. So what teams are you going to play? What are their strengths? What are your weaknesses? And do you match up well with them? So hopefully, like my goal, and I say it every week, Penguins start when January hits, bull season wraps up, we're able to see some consistent line play, and they'll start to position themselves for making a run. And luckily, they had fallen all the way to last place. They're making a push, getting back around. Right the ship. Use your talent to your advantage. And it's not all old talent either. You got young guys like Gensel that are able to score goals. So I don't even know if there's going to be a complete rebuild. I mean, the Steelers never had a complete rebuild. So just got to have the good mix of old and young talent. Speaking of the Steelers, let's get into a negative. I was going to say, usually we would do college football at the end because I know a lot of people just care about Pittsburgh. But it was an overall awful weekend for football for us. I think all of our teams lost, including Pitt and Steelers. Steelers are back to their old ways. The turnover machine. 4 turnovers. Connor with a costly fumble going down towards, what was it, like the 20-yard line. And I don't even think the ball was hit. He jumps, and I don't know if he squeezed it too tight. Ball pops straight up in the air, right to a Broncos defender. That one hurt. Some of the, interceptions, I believe. That one, those sting, because you need to go ahead and be able to get just drives going, and interceptions are killers. So I have the stats up here. The game overall, if you're looking just at the game itself, the Steelers had the edge, 527 yards to 308 yards for Denver. First downs, 25 to Pittsburgh, 17 to Denver. Steelers also led the time of possession with 35 minutes. The only thing that they lost, points scored, and the 4 turnovers. Denver didn't have any turnovers. I will say, and before I get your thoughts, I wanted to bring up the one positive that I loved. Right before halftime, perfect scenario for it. At halftime, who cares if you're down a touchdown or whatever many points, you can always make that up in the second half. They go with the fake field goal. Denver had no idea that it was coming. Pass right to who caught Villanueva, right in the end zone. Good throw by was it the kicker? Can't remember who they snapped to. But I just like that sometimes the NFL does a very good job of protecting their coaches, but the camera work panned right to the coaches, and you could see that they were tense on the Broncos sidelines. They were yelling at each other, "Come on, what are we doing out there?" You got to be – they were close enough to the end zone where you just think you're going to kick the field goal, take the 3 points, go into halftime. But at that point, who cares? You're going to be down 1 score no matter what. A field goal only gets you closer, but you're still down 4 points. So you would still need a touchdown or 2 field goals. Why not go for it? They did, caught them completely off guard, and I loved it. Unfortunately, the rest of the game did not go well in the second half. But, Matt, did you watch the game any? And do you have any thoughts on the Steelers?
I did. And I almost think when you're watching this week, it's the live by the sword, die by the sword, and this week we died by the sword. You look at the previous weeks, and using the late game heroics, they were able to pull it off at the end with the power read and Ben pushing it into the end zone. This week, they ran that chinky pop pass at the end, and it bit them. Denver aligned in his own blitz, and the defensive tackle picked them off. That play as a whole looked horrific. The snap was off, the fake was off, like everything about that play was wrong. But I think like that epitomizes how Pittsburgh plays. You'll have 1 week where they absolutely play, and I think it fuels that fire for the conspiracy theorists that say that the NFL is rigged, because you have the Pittsburgh team that goes up against Carolina and blows them out of the water. And they drive down last week, and then they're dead in the water, and then they just drive right down the field, no problem, and score the game-winning touchdown, looking like a really competitive playoff team. And then you have them this week versus Denver, a team that let's be honest, they should have handled and handled convincingly, and they just let them hang around. And you can't make the kind of fumbles and different things. I thought the pass to the tight end where he fumbled it out of the end zone was the worst one of the turnovers, to be honest, because he was by himself. And there was no one around him. The only person that was near him was the last defender before the end zone. And if he takes one step to the right, instead of just putting his head down and trying to run him over, he walks in. He doesn't have to. He goes untouched into the end zone, but he tries to initiate that contact, puts his head down, barrels in, and fumbles the ball at the back of the end zone. And those are the types of plays that typically Pittsburgh makes that unfortunately they didn't make this week.
I think the worst part for me is that this loss knocked them out of the driver's seat for the bye in the AFC playoffs. And I think the bye week would really benefit Pittsburgh compared to other teams, because it's all about matchups right now, and they're so Jekyll and Hyde. They could get hot, go on a 3 or 4 game win streak, and win the whole thing. Or remember the Jacksonville game in the playoffs last week, get a bad matchup or get a turnover-filled game, and you could lose to anybody except for the Browns, because we'll just tie them if we have a bad game against them. They don't actually beat us ever. So you're just thinking, what could go wrong? And whenever I'm watching this, it's kind of like you hear a lot of fans, a lot of Yinzers around Pittsburgh talk about how Ben Roethlisberger needs to retire and all this stuff. And the games like this are the ones where I think that minority gets the loudest. And yeah, if you can have them to Denver, cool. I mean, I would rather have had an awful game against the Saints down the stretch. Someone that you know is going to be tough to beat anyway. Because now you knock off Denver, you're still in the driver's seat for the bye. You're going up against the Chargers this week. They're hot and cold too. Then you have to go all the way to Oakland. Luckily, Oakland is a dumpster fire. But it's on the road, and a lot of teams struggle going into the West Coast time zone and winning. Those games, they basically become must-wins if you want to get that, because then you follow those up with New England at home, then you travel to New Orleans. And New England's always going to be a tough out with Tom Brady, and the Saints look like they're the best team in the league. And then you end the season with the Bengals, and the Bengals played the Steelers tough the first time. So what's it really going to come down to? If you remember, I think the Bengals game was won whenever Antonio Brown caught the slant at the end of the game and took it to the house. So those last 3 games, Steelers could drop all 3 of them. And then you're potentially looking at, I don't think they drop all 5, but the next 2 become very important to get to that 9-win level and make sure that you have that division locked up and or the wild card, or at least be in that discussion. I think that's what hurts the hardest. Denver was a winnable game, and they're self-inflicted wounds. So, anything else, Matt, you have for Steelers?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I just think the issues that they have are the issues that they have, and they're going to live week by week, and it's just a reflection of where they're at as a team. Although I like you said, I do like the effort that they put forth on the special teams, but you almost have to just take what they're doing with a grain of salt, because for every really, really good thing, they're going to do 2 or 3 boneheaded things too.
Yeah, big game against the Chargers. I would say must win. Lock up these next 2, get to 9 wins, and let's go. Around the rest of the NFL, Thanksgiving, I always get, I don't want to say excited to watch Thanksgiving games, but normally I don't care about the Cowboys at all. Not a fan. I never watch them if they're on because I don't care about them. But then I get to sit down and watch them play the Redskins, and I just feel so bad for the Redskins because they had such a good thing going with Alex Smith to have him get injured, and now the Cowboys take over that division. Eagles, I don't know what happened to them. Falling off after last year. Is it because of the quarterback stuff? Going back and forth?
I think on that note, I think there were just so many personnel people that were cherry-picked in that organization, from coordinators to front office personnel to up and down the line. And I think even to a certain extent, trying to just figure out who your starting quarterback's going to be, I think has an effect, because when you're prepared for one guy and it ends up being another, they went back and forth from Foles to now they're back to Wentz. I do think that weighs on you.
Well, definitely. I think that's 100% going to be a locker room issue, and just like it was going to be if Bell came back for the Steelers. You can't have a guy win you a Super Bowl and have the other guy come back and it work out. I mean, there's a reason the Patriots let Drew Bledsoe go all those years back and stuck with Tom Brady. You have to make your decision. And that division kind of is a mess. So on Thanksgiving, I have to watch the Cowboys, and I see them win. Heartbreaking seeing them win. Then what else? We get, was it the Lions game, Matt, that was so brutal to watch that I texted you during?
Yes.
And said, what is going on here? It was like going back in time and watching Greg Davis. He was an offensive coordinator for the Iowa Hawkeyes and later the Texas Longhorns, I believe, where the bulk of his plays were screens behind the line of scrimmage or 3 to 5 yards out. If it's 3rd and 7, you run a 5-yard out and come up 2 yards short. Third and 5, you run a 3-yard out and come up 2 yards short. And that's what it felt like I was watching the Lions. Like, they weren't trying to score. And Matt Stafford, for how great of a quarterback he is, they had never unleashed him. And I don't know what is going on with that organization, but the fans have to be upset. You get a new coach, everyone's pumped. They think this is going to be the year. They get some wins. They beat the Patriots. The Panthers go for 2 and fail. Get the Lions right there, close to the division. And then they go into the Thanksgiving game and lay an egg just like every other year. So, it's baffling to me that because here, most of the games on TV are through CBS. I see more AFC teams, and the NFC team that's always on is Carolina Panthers because of the state that I live in. So I don't get to see a lot of these other teams on television, so I haven't watched really the Lions all year, and just to see that performance was frustrating. I don't know how anyone could sit down and think, well, that was fun. I really enjoyed watching that Lions game because it wasn't like they were trying to win. It was almost like a coach was just trying to bleed the clock dry.
Well, that's what you get when you have in Detroit. You have a defensive-minded coach, and who follows that philosophy that your defense is going to win you the game, and the offense just has to do enough to not lose it for you. And I think that it's a situation that it could be beneficial for a team like Detroit, who struggles and has historically not been very good. I mean, they've had single players, through the 90s. You had Barry Sanders, that it was pretty much give him the ball and get the hell out of the way. And through the early 2000s, it was Megatron, and it didn't matter who was covering him. Just throw it up, and he was so big and physical that he just made plays, and you knew that he was getting the ball. But now it's like you really don't have that bell cow type player.
Yeah, I think at this point, why not make a move? Why not try to get someone like Todd Haley that's available right in the middle of the season and try to change things up? I don't know what the actual standings are right now after that game. I'll try to bring them up real quick. But overall, you're right there. I'm watching the game thinking the Packers aren't world beaters. After the whole time, for some reason, all the other sports media is in love with Aaron Rodgers. So throughout Thanksgiving, I heard that Aaron Rodgers has a plan to get 4. I don't know what they were. 4, 5,
they're 4 and 7. They're in the playoff hunt. I mean, they're in the middle of it.
Yeah, he had a plan to get them in there, but now they lost again. So they're 4, 6, and 1. And why do I have to hear that? You have the Bears just in charge of that division. My man Mitch Trubisky, man, he's let me down. Sore arm, sore shoulder. I need to get him back this week. Need to get him back for some fantasy football. Because I got you.
No, you don't.
I got you.
No, you don't.
I got you in the playoffs.
No, you don't. He can take another week off and rest.
I'm favored right now. Did you see that? And I don't even have a quarterback in.
No, I did not.
All my quarterbacks are hurt. Alex Smith broke his leg. That's how I'm up to date on that. And Mitch Trubisky woke up with a sore arm, like he was out playing beer pong all night or something. The rest of that division, though, I mean, the NFC is so bad that Detroit could have made a run, and same with Washington. I see Washington, and I'm not knocking Colt McCoy. I think what really hurt him was getting hurt in that national championship game. It's really tough to come back from an injury. And the NFC is kind of wide open. You have Carolina Panthers at 6-5, Seattle Seahawks now, and those Redskins in the driver's seat competing with the Vikings for those 2 wild card spots. And that's if the Cowboys, who are also 6-5, hold their division lead. So that was the other thing I thought.
that was the big shocker of the weekend, is that now all of a sudden Dallas is in the driver's seat for that division and playoff spot, and they're awful. And all year you've been hearing about how bad they are, and now here they are, top 4 teams in the NFC.
Well, the same thing with the Seahawks. Oh, we heard, what was that, 2 or 3 weeks ago, that Pete Carroll, they were looking to shop him out. Push him out of town, and they're right there now. 6-5, in charge for that wild card spot. I mean, they could easily win. They're not going to win the division behind the Rams, but in the NFC, all you have to do is make the playoffs. You can easily win in that first round because the Saints and the Rams are going to get the bye. Anyone else is beatable. Who knows then after that? Who knows? It only takes one other game. Get that upset, and then you're in the championship game, ready to go to the Super Bowl. You only need 2 wins. So that was my Thanksgiving thoughts. Man, I don't watch a lot of NFC football, but dude, are they bad. And speaking of bad, my last thing for the NFL are our guys over in Ohio, Cincinnati Bengals. Did you hear that they are considering hiring Hugh Jackson? Is it Hugh Jackson?
They did already.
No,
they did.
As the head coach to replace Marvin Lewis. That's the rumors floating around, Matt. Marvin Lewis has lost the team.
Shut up. I'm
throwing it up there.
No. In what realm, in what reality? Like, you have HBO to watch firsthand and see why that would be a really bad idea.
It's a good idea for Pittsburgh fans. The Browns are going to hire Condoleezza Rice. That was thrown out there for a while. While the Bengals take Hugh Jackson off our hands.
Well, see, the funny thing is that with Cleveland, they have, is it Greg Williams, their defensive coordinator now, as their interim head coach? He's a dick. He's out there putting bounties on people with the Saints. I mean, I think he has that mindset that, like, he could potentially, like, if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, that could be a guy that could turn your franchise around. And they're just playing Who Wants to Be the Coach of the Browns, like, reality TV show.
I think they should play the villain because it's not the Raiders right now. John Gruden could have came in, been happy, took that Raiders team to the playoffs, and turned the Raiders back into the villain with him out there being the media type. And you know that fans hate when the coach is in the media. Just look at what all the hate Harbaugh gets. So the Raiders could have been the villain, but because they're doing that weird tanking thing, make the Browns the villain. At least make them relevant. I would be all for that, Matt. I think you're onto something. Hire them or promote them from within, whatever. Bring back the bounties. Just say you don't know about him. And let's see what happens. Just don't put him in the Steelers game. Come on, please. Don't you want someone from the division to win a Super Bowl? We're the best shot. Browns coach. So, I don't know. Those are my random thoughts. The 2 worst teams in our, at least from a managerial position, happen to be in the AFC North. Steelers get them 2 times a year. And these are the moves that they're considering. Hiring someone that has never coached before. She was in government. I honestly don't even know what position she was in. And then just be like, oh, the Browns failed? You had a win, though, didn't you? Won? Come over. We have discipline issues here at the Bengals. But as long as we clean those up, those wins will come back. Speechless. Anything else you have for the NFL?
No.
All right, let's get into the big game. Pitt, Clemson. My favorite Pitt coach, Dave Wannstedt, actually called into Harbaugh's podcast. I had to listen to it after the Ohio State loss. And Wannstedt really loves Pitt. He still loves them. He said that he didn't even want to take that job immediately because he didn't think that it was for him. He had other coaches in mind that he thought could be more successful until he got talked into that job. And you know what? I didn't realize the AD that hired him was Jeff Long, the Michigan man that just hired Les Miles at Kansas. Dave Wannstedt said that he was the one that called him, and he knew that he was a football guy at Pitt. Because remember, we go back, what was that, couple months ago? And maybe a year ago, I was arguing with Jeff, saying that Pitt then reinvested and became a basketball school. They had that football AD. They let him go to Arkansas. Jeff Long went to Arkansas. Now he's at Kansas. They want to take that football approach. They want to get relevant. They're already relevant in basketball. Their football team is a laughingstock. Can you imagine how much more money they could have if they were even at both? Really? You can't tell me Iowa State is a better program than Kansas. So I just wanted to give a shout out to my favorite coach, Dave Wannstedt, my favorite Pitt Panthers coach, because he recruited Pennsylvania and he said that he knew coming in that he could get guys from the backyard, and right now that's what Pitt lacks. So maybe this ACC championship game will get them over that hump. Follow the Wannstedt model. Get the guys in your backyard. Get some guys right across the border in Ohio that Ohio State's overlooking. Because you know who else makes a living off that? Michigan State and Mark D'Antonio. Ohio is I think the fourth richest football state in the country. Get players in your backyard, Pitt. This is your chance. Make a good showing in this game against Clemson. You upset them before. Didn't matter. The playoff committee just laughed in your face and put Clemson in the playoffs anyway. Upset Penn State. You upset Miami, number 2. I think Miami was number 2. You almost upset Notre Dame this year, so you're due. Get the upset. Win the ACC. Ride that to a better recruiting class and actually start to build your program, because I think right now that is what the knock on Narduzzi is. He can get the guys to play up. Definitely get the guys to play up, but whenever your talent level isn't as high as some of these higher programs, you struggle with programs that are at your level or below. And so that's where this is such a huge game for the Pitt Panthers program. The basketball team had to reset completely this year. So, or I guess last year, whenever they brought in Capel. So, any thoughts you have on the game going into it, and what's your prediction?
Well, I think Pitt's up against. I think that they're going to. The opportunities for them to win this game, basically what the blueprint for them has to be, is I think they pretty much have to follow what they did against Penn State a couple years ago, because they're definitely outmanned in a lot of aspects. So I think what they got to do is they got to go in knowing that Clemson's defensive line is going to be very aggressive, and to try to neutralize that, use a lot of those shuffle passes and different things to screen passes. Things are going to, if they're going to be overly aggressive, that you take the edge off and give Pickett a little bit more time to throw the ball. I think that's going to be one of the biggest keys to that game. If they can't get some plays early on and establish some flow, I think Clemson really just is going to put the boots to Pitt early, and the game's going to be out of reach early.
I think I'm going to take the opposite prediction. I think Pitt's going to hang around till about halftime like they did with Penn State. And I think that is where you see the talent level dip. That is where Narduzzi is going to have to really, really hold on to the ball in that first half, similar to what Syracuse did. Throw out some trick plays, if you remember. Syracuse threw that tight end comeback pass on 4th down or something that got called back because a lineman was downfield. If that pass goes through and that's completed, there's a great chance Syracuse has already beaten Clemson this year. That's the model Pitt has to follow. Get outside your realm. If you remember the Penn State upset, and even the year after, they were throwing underneath with shuttle passes and all kind of other stuff, tried to move the ball. And, of course, they had James Conner. Makes it a little bit different now, seeing how successful he is in the NFL and how dynamic of a back he is. I think they keep it close, and I honestly think in Clemson's favor, the score is kind of high similar to how it was against South Carolina this past week, where it's going to be like 20, 27, 21, or 24, 21. Clemson will have a lead, and then they pull away and win maybe 40, 42 to like 30, where they really just take off the gas and get ready to go in the playoffs. I don't think Dabo will run the score up on Pitt, and I don't think Narduzzi will allow him to. But I could even see a 40-20 score, 42-24, something like that. I'd love to be wrong, but that's my thoughts going into that game. Anything else you have on that or the ACC in general?
You
want to talk about
ACC.
it?
Yeah, I might as well talk about it. Frustrated, but the 36-year bowl streak finally comes to an end. Noles lose to those George Swears down in Gainesville. It was a tough game to watch, and I think to me one of the things that's kind of frustrating, knowing as a coach the things that you deal with in a locker room and trying to establish a culture within a program, is seeing a lot of the fair weather fans turning, and you see a lot of comments. And I think with the social media stuff, it's real easy to sit back and say, well, you need to make a change of quarterback, and you need to play this guy, or you need to do this scheme. Well, that's all good, but if you don't have the Jimmies and Joes to execute whatever that scheme is, you're going to struggle. And I think it's been a frustrating year, but I think it's a season that's been building to this point, and they honestly have no one to blame but themselves. It was a frustrating game to watch, and it sucks that they're not bowling this year. But hopefully, Willie Taggart, it seems like he's meeting with the players, he's meeting with the coaches, and I like the fact that he's being proactive in his approach of trying to find guys that fit with what he's going to do, and hopefully use that going forward to get the program going in the direction that it needs to.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the Florida State, technically their bowl streak was over whenever they got vacated in 2005. And then last year, there was some controversy where they might not even have been bowl eligible because they scheduled some patsy that didn't meet NCAA rules. Remember that?
It met. It counted. They went to a bowl game.
It was already too late. They played powerful Southern Miss, didn't they?
They did play Southern Miss, and they won. Odo Higgins, 2-0.
I will say that the ACC is such a mix. When Florida State's down, the conference as a whole looks very weak, especially because Miami hasn't picked up that slack. The worst part is Notre Dame goes undefeated. They get all the bells and whistles, and if you remember, this is what killed the Big East. Notre Dame gets all the accolades. They're going to get that playoff spot. If Pitt beats Clemson, ACC's out. They don't get any of that Notre Dame money. Clemson will get jumped possibly. We don't know because there could be some weird scenarios going down that we're going to get into later in the show. But, I mean, everything's riding on Clemson right now. The Notre Dame, the money thing is just baffling that the ACC wouldn't want to split that with Notre Dame in the rare instances like this year, because the windfall that would happen that Notre Dame and Clemson both make it, you would have had basically the same windfall the SEC had with two teams in the playoffs. It's like $24 million a team or something like that. So to have Notre Dame secure that is just heartbreaking, especially now that they're back on the Michigan schedule. We don't need those guys getting any more money. They have enough donors. We don't need Brian Kelly flying around recruiting. I hope he goes to the NFL. There's been rumors that he's going to go to the NFL. I think he would actually be successful there. And to be honest, did you see the line that he said after the game?
No.
They came up to him and said, well, what year was harder, going undefeated, 2012 or this year? And he said, 2009 at Cincinnati. Like as a quip to remind the reporter that he's actually gone undefeated other times. So not just because you know what was coming next. They were probably going to throw a dig in Do you think you'd get blown out in the playoffs just like in 2012? That type of thing is how it seemed like the interview was going to go, and he just spun it around. So actually very happy for him because I know he gets a lot of shit at Notre Dame. They don't, for some reason, they're not behind their coaches. Like the athletic department, there's always like, oh, we'll put a letter out where we're going to say, yeah, we kind of like Brian Kelly, but we don't like the way he acts on the sideline. That's not very Notre Dame-like. It's kind of like a backhanded compliment that they give him. And they've been doing it for like how many years now? However long he's been there, it seems like they always give a compliment like that to him. And it's just weird. And I think this second undefeated season validates everything that he's done. He's cut bait. He got his own offensive coordinator, stopped calling plays, went for more of the CEO type, and it worked. And I think that's what you have to do at the NFL level. So I think if he does jump, he will be successful. And if I'm the Bengals, that's the kind of guy that I try to bring in. Browns, I don't know if he would go to that situation, but try to bring them in. He's been in that area, coached at Cincinnati before. That's where he was before he went to Notre Dame. Bring him in. Don't hire you, Jackson. What is it? Jackman or Jackson? Jackson, I think.
Jackman. He's not Wolverine. I'm not hiring Wolverine. Although hiring Wolverine as the coach of the Bengals might be a better upgrade.
He's a ballet dancer. I bet they'd be nimbly. They'd have the best pregame stretch routine. But, I mean, that's what I would say. If you're Notre Dame and you're Brian Kelly, and at some point he has to be tired of this ridicule. And even now, there were talks about, does Notre Dame deserve to make the playoffs because they're not in a conference? They 100% deserve to make it. Like, who are we kidding? UCF has a clear path, and they have a way worse schedule than what Notre Dame has. Unfortunately for UCF, their second, and I'm getting way off topic here, but their second undefeated season comes the same year that Notre Dame goes undefeated. And they'll always slot behind them. So let's get into, before we get into the college football playoffs, let's get into the Big Ten championship game. And might as well do my piece here because I know people are listening and waiting for it. But I want to congratulate my boys, Michigan Wolverines, winning their first division title. Unfortunately, they lose the tiebreaker to Ohio State and will not be playing in the Big Ten championship game. I was actually looking at the rankings, and Michigan didn't drop that far. Ohio State is 6th. Michigan is 7th. So even though the Buckeyes won on the scoreboard, committee didn't think that they were that much more overpowering than Michigan. And because normally if you get blown out, you drop however many spots. I could have saw Michigan ranked anywhere from 10th to 11th, 12th. But instead, to land at 7 right behind Ohio State, I think really says something. You saw Washington State drop all the way back down. I think I have the standings here. Washington State dropped 5 spots. Michigan only fell 3. Washington State is 13th.
Now, my question with that is, what do any kind of committee look at? And I know you don't know the answer to this, but like, what is the criteria for falling in certain aspects? Because I find it interesting that, like, you look at, and we'll use Michigan. Michigan falls from 4 to 7. So if they're falling that many spots, did they use that as the template so that when Alabama, if they potentially lose to Georgia, that they can still say, oh, no, they're still in because we only dropped Michigan so far after losing to Ohio State, and trying to keep teams into playoffs?
That's a good point, and you're right. A fall 3 spots would get Alabama to that 4th seed. Now, I think it comes down to who did they lose to in the records. The records really lined up this year. The most surprising thing to me was that UCF didn't jump Michigan. And the point, and I think the reason, everyone else has 3 losses or more except for that Washington State team that's now 13th. And Michigan, for some reason, I heard them talking about it on Fox or Yahoo, one of their videos. They have the 2 best losses in college football, and I don't think they're going to be able to be topped. If Alabama beats Georgia, I mean, Georgia still had Well, what did that loss end up being? They lost by 20 as well, didn't they, to LSU? And in that scenario, they lost by 20 to LSU, and then they would lose to Alabama. Michigan loses to Notre Dame and Ohio State. At that point, Ohio State's ranked higher than LSU. Could be a little bit of here nor there, but I would assume Ohio State would still stay ahead of LSU. And Notre Dame and Alabama are still 1, 2, 3, both undefeated teams. The loss to Alabama is at a neutral site. Michigan loses to Notre Dame on the road. Both Michigan losses were to top 10 teams on the road. And I think that's where every other team, as I'm looking at this, Ohio State got blown out by Purdue. That's a worse loss than anything Michigan has. Oklahoma lost to Texas. That's a worse team than that Michigan has lost to. And if they were to lose again, they would have lost to that same Texas team twice. And the real kicker is, if Texas wins the Big 12 championship, I don't think they jump ahead to make the playoffs. And the reason is they lost to Maryland. Michigan pasted them. Ohio State struggled with Maryland. So if you're looking at teams, that's where it lines up weird this year. Both teams, Ohio State and Michigan, had blowouts to other teams. The only thing that hurt Michigan was they only had one loss, and it just happened to be to Ohio State. If Ohio State would have lost to Maryland, if Maryland hits that wide open guy for the 2-point conversion, Michigan's in this championship game, and there's a chance that Michigan is ranked ahead of Ohio State this week instead. So it's weird going into this game, the Big Ten championship game. It might mean everything. It might not. You have Northwestern. They're busting almost all their students in, as many as they can get signed up, and they're trying to make it a home game for them. Pat Fitzgerald always gets his guys up. Is Urban Meyer, that was the best the Buckeyes had played against Michigan all year. That was their best game of the year. Is that due to scheme? Were they holding stuff back and now they're ready to let it fly against Northwestern? Or is that more of an emotional high? You're ready, you're pumped up to play your rivals. Do they fall flat in this Big Ten championship game? Those are the storylines that we have to watch, because Oklahoma plays Texas. They've already lost to them once. This is a neutral site game, just like that first game was. If they lose to them again, I would assume that Oklahoma's out of the playoffs. The other team that's ahead right now is Georgia. They play Alabama. There's a good chance Alabama beats them. And at that point, if you're Alabama, do you really want to risk losing, like holding back some of your game plan for the playoffs, losing to Georgia and having an Ohio State that runs the score up on Northwestern jump you when you both have one loss? That's the risk you're taking. One's a conference champ, one's not. It's going to be an interesting week. This weekend is going to be more interesting going into than I thought it was going to end up being, because everything, the way things landed and the upsets happened. The other big one was Washington State losing, and I feel bad for my man Mike Leach, because they played Washington in a snowstorm, absolute snowstorm, and Washington State's offense is built around the pass. And I don't want to use that as an excuse for why they lost, but you have to feel bad that if that game is played anywhere else, better conditions, inside a dome, that they win.
But do you think that Mike Leach was also distracted by the thought of playing at a place that might be a little bit warmer, like, I don't know, maybe Texas Tech?
I will say, I sent you that they've been asking him. And, I think he's using that as a way to see if they'll pay him, because he wrote that book, Swing Your Sword, where he says that Texas Tech still owes him for the 2009 season. I think they froze his pay, fired him for what they had said was cause, and they never paid him that. And he's been fighting a legal battle over it. So he said, he put a tweet out, I think it was a tweet out, or maybe it was an interview. He said today, the first thing that would come down to Texas Tech, if they were looking at me for their coach, they'd have to pay me for that, I think it was 2009 season where I had 9 wins. He said the last 9-win season Texas Tech has had. He's like, they haven't had any more success since then. He's like, it's been all downhill. So I think he was just taking a jab at them. And I honestly think it was the conditions. Because Washington State was really battling back. And I think this was the year that they win that game. They're in the Pac-12 championship. And then you really have a shakeup. Because you have 3 or 4 teams battling for 4th place. Now it's more along the lines of who is going to lose and what happens. You have 2 teams. Ohio State, you don't know what team's going to show up. Yeah, they ran the score up on Michigan. They could have had 70. I wish they would have scored 70. But Urban took a knee at the end because the Michigan defense was gassed. And I'll talk on that game. I thought Michigan came out, and it's 100% on the coaching. They came out flat. And Michigan hasn't approached that game like a rivalry for over a decade. And for whatever reason, it's a mental thing right now. I saw a lot of people say that Ohio State's just way more talented. The talent is very, very close. And you could see it at certain points in the game. If you go back and watch a tape, I feel really bad for Watson. I think he is their 3rd cornerback. He played a lot of nickel packages. But Ohio State's most of their passing yards came against him. Like Urban Meyer just said, hey, they lined a freshman up, a 3-star freshman. So it's not like they had a 5-star guy running by him. He said, we know this is your weakest link, and we're just going to keep attacking him and attacking him. And I even the highlight, if you watch the game or watch another game, what game followed? The Iron Bowl? They kept showing that highlight, and even the commentator said, like, they're just going to keep picking on Watson here. And I felt so bad for the kid because he just looked like, hey, I just can't keep up with this guy. Don Brown, I give him a lot of shout-outs on the show. You got to step in and get your guy some help. You can't leave him out to dry for 3 quarters. Because I think what happened was he kept getting burned on the crossing route. Ohio State kept staying on the field, and it's a compliment to the Michigan defense. They haven't been on the field that long in any game. They haven't played that many plays, and they were entirely gassed at the end of that 3rd quarter. I think it was still... When was the punt block? There was a punt block in the 3rd quarter at the end of the 3rd quarter when Michigan really fell apart. It started with a kickoff that the guy caught and ran out of bounds at the 10-yard line. He didn't fair catch it. Then they got the punt blocked. And after that, Ohio State was able to do whatever they wanted. And it's on the coaches for not getting their guys help and getting that defense off the field. So I think Coach Harbaugh came out and took responsibility for that. And I honestly think it was more of a pride thing where they thought, we're going to line up against Ohio State. They bought into the hype. They said, hey, we're just going to run down their throats like we've been doing all year. And I think they bought into the hype that they could just bully Ohio State. And right around halftime, they were down, 5? They went for 2, and then I think Ohio State got a field goal right before the end of the half. So they were down 1 score. They came out in the second half, tried to do their run, and it wasn't getting them anywhere. So I honestly thought the lines were very, very evenly matched because I was at the game, was it 3 years ago, when Ezekiel Elliott ran wild? That was a game where Michigan was overmatched. I didn't see a team that was getting pushed around. I thought both lines were very even. I thought Urban Meyer did a hell of a job scheming up those deficiencies, and Don Brown didn't switch to zone. Got to switch to zone or get your guys some help over the top. You can't be playing man on crossing routes if your defender can't cover them. Really felt bad for Watson. I know I probably tailed on long, but that was the biggest game of the weekend and a huge upset. I think that was the most points Michigan's ever given up in regulation, going all the way back to the 1800s.
Well, that was a bad game, but I don't even know that switching to zone would have helped because with those shallow cross, if you jump the underneath, there's usually either a dig or a post, on the opposite side of it, that it would have only gotten worse. So I think it was one of those things where knowing going in, I think Urban Meyer's whole thing was keep it competitive, win the Michigan game, and then throttle in the Big Ten championship, and it gives you a fighting chance. It's the same blueprint that he followed in 2014, where
he followed it at Florida, 2006. Remember they backed in.
Where it's you have that embarrassing early season loss to Purdue that you throttle Michigan and then you throttle whoever in the Big Ten championship, and now people think, well, you know what, maybe that was just a slip up. They have to be for real, and you give them a seat at the table, because that's the only reason that you run the score up as high as what he did. Just knowing that you have to do that to give your team some credibility after embarrassing yourselves for half a season. And it's one of the reasons why, personally, I can't stand Urban Meyer as a coach, because he'll have those snag-up games, and it's like there's always like some other excuse, and it just seems like he's always like willing to pass the blame on to everything else but his team just laying an egg. And then all of a sudden they find themselves in a position where they just fall in crap and come out smelling like a rose.
Yeah, I would say that they definitely put more stock into the rivalry game. They went in, they had a plan. Michigan didn't have anything special planned, and I had talked about it. It looked like we were setting up to have some of those actual read options where Shea would run. I don't think those were ever actually read options. It just looked like it was a delayed handoff. He never once ran. I think he ran once in the game. But most of them, it looked just like a slow developing play. Did it work against smaller teams? Yeah. But when the lines are evenly matched and you don't get that push 3 yards down the field, you're only picking up 1 or 2 yards.
But that might also be the same issue that Florida State had this year too, where if you're running designed reads and your quarterback isn't reading it the way you want it to, because Harbaugh ran zone read principles when he was with the Niners and with Kaepernick, and did it with some success. But I think he was trying to pull some of those same principles with Patterson. And if he's not comfortable pulling the ball and he's just handing it off, because I know with my own quarterbacks, with any of our RPO stuff, it would always be, if you're not 100% in love with the throw, hand it off. So if he wasn't comfortable with that, then that makes it look 1,000 times worse and puts you behind the chains.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he was comfortable. And if you looked in that game, he looked like the situation was too big for him. And it was kind of disappointing because he had taken down Alabama before. So you thought going into the game, this is a quarterback that's finally going to be able to put a team on the back. I think if you had a performance like Devin Gardner had for Michigan a few years ago on a broken foot, Michigan very well could have been in a shootout and won that game. But there were a couple throws late in the game that Shea skipped to receivers. He threw them short. I don't know if he was hurt. I know they said that after the game he couldn't walk up the stairs, but I think a couple of those throws came before he went down with the injury. And coach puts in Brandon Peters. He makes one great throw, and then he takes him out. I don't know if it was for a touchdown or I can't remember at that point. But why not go? If you know this is going to be a passing shootout, put in the guy that passes then. If Patterson's not getting it done, at that point it might have been too much. But just to show how even the game seemed to be, both teams had 28 first downs. So it wasn't like Michigan's offense was the problem. They were just in a shootout that they let Ohio State get some scores with a block punt, which was a touchdown, and then some other just looked like they played scared plays. But it's going to be interesting to see how if these couple upsets happen, if Georgia loses, Ohio State loses, and Oklahoma loses, what does the committee do? And I wanted to get your thought on this, Matt. Do they just put those 4 teams, add Michigan in there in a hat, and draw? Or do they give UCF a chance?
UCF, I want to see the scenario where they leave UCF out. If all of those teams lose and they still leave UCF out, I think it creates the scenario where you see last year where a lot of the Power 5 schools got pissed at UCF for doing it. But UCF, keep winning. Just keep winning and then claim the national championship. because that's the only way you're going to get respect. That's the only way you're going to get a seat at the table, because eventually you'll draw interest from one of the Power 5 schools, and they'll give you that opportunity to jump into the conference, and then you'll have a legitimate seat at the table. Because right now, being in the conference that they're in, they're not going to get the respect that they would from a Power 5.
And I'll even say there were some rumors that came back up again that, and we know this happened, the Big 12 had investigated a couple teams. They had looked at South Florida, they looked at UCF, they looked at Cincinnati. I could see a scenario where if I'm the Big 12 commissioner, I add UCF and I add Cincinnati. And I'll tell you why. Your conference right now gets some disrespect. That puts you in 2 of the top 4 recruiting states. You now are going to be able to steal recruits from Ohio State, teams that want to go south. There's no other big school in Ohio. If you want to play big-time football, you stay at Ohio State.
The only scenario that I would, if I was UCF, that I would do that is if you petition in some way, shape, or form that you get divisions lined up and you get people in spots where you have your conference championship and it's not 1 versus 2. Because all that does is you end up having to play another really competitive game, and it ends up hurting you in the long run. It doesn't make you better prepared for bowl season.
I think that's how they fix it. I think UCF gets added, and they're in the division, and you just kind of have it go down from Florida up to West Virginia, Cincinnati, and across Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa, kind of like that Big 12 North used to be, where that team's going to get into the championship game, sort of like the Big 10 has right now. You have both your powers that beat up on each other. Ohio State beats up on Michigan. Michigan doesn't drop because they already cleaned house the rest of their schedule. So they're sitting right there. In the Big 12, you have that same thing, and I'm a big proponent. Put Clemson and Florida State together because that's only going to make both of them stronger. It's going to ebb and flow. I think that's where Michigan really, really dropped off, was when they were shoved into the Western Division. They didn't really have to compete for recruits against Ohio State, and that's where you see the talent deficiency come in. Because they're recruiting against teams like Minnesota and Wisconsin, or I guess Wisconsin was the crossover school, but Northwestern, teams like that weren't getting the big kids. Keep your 2 powers in the same division, exactly like the SEC does with LSU and Bama and Auburn. Keep some other schools on the east side that could win. West Virginia could go on a run. UCF could go on a run. And then it's going to give you a respectable opponent. Let's say if Ohio State played Wisconsin this week, or Iowa. That's a respectable opponent. Northwestern, people are still respecting that game. Even though it's not them playing a rematch against Michigan. But now, if Ohio State loses, guess what? Big Ten still has a chance, because guess who's not going to drop this week? Michigan. Because they don't play. And you're exactly right. Can't put them 1 versus 2. Got to put them on opposite sides. And I think UCF adds clout to that North Division, because for however many years it was just Nebraska. And to be honest, Nebraska's fallen off. Maybe not as a historical, but West Virginia and UCF in the same division, I think that gives you some credibility. And it also allows teams like Iowa State, Kansas with Les Miles, to make a play and win that division to get in that championship game. So, any other thoughts on that?
Well, you were saying about WVU, and I actually thought that was probably the best game of the weekend, the Oklahoma West Virginia game. And I mean, in terms of points scored, in terms of 2 play callers just duking it out, it was amazing. And I think, I saw some comments that was saying that with what Don Brown saw against Ohio State's offense is what Big 12 coordinators have to go against weekly, because they're going up against those high-powered, high-tempo spread offenses, and it's tough for defensive coordinators in the Big 12 to maintain their job security, because they're going up against these tempo offenses that are just they're pushing the limits on what offenses can do. And ripping off chunks of yardage.
Yeah, I'll say you're right. Big 12 gets a lot of disrespect because of the defenses. And I think one way to get rid of that controversy or criticism is to add 2 more teams. I know the original thing came back and said TV networks said that neither team would move the needle. Who cares? Cable TV is dying. Get 2 teams so that you're actually in the playoffs. How many years has the Big 12 been left out? Has it only been 1? Has it been more than 1? They're looking at it right now.
Oklahoma's the one. Well, you see, what is it, Oklahoma, Texas now for the Big 12 championship?
Yeah. Again, Texas could very well win.
They keep saying Texas is back. I don't see how Texas is back. How are they relevant in anything other than having their own network?
Matt, their coach says, "Okay, cool, hook them." He says that after people accuse him of going to Asian masseuses and getting happy endings and hooking up with Iowa State recruiting girls. My favorite Buckeye coach of all time, Zach Smith, said that. He said that on the Twitter.
The Twitter, like a grandpa.
That's how they stay relevant. Hire some coach that's making wins. You got to go out there. You got to break in, make waves. Who knows? Get your name out there. Tom Herman. Then his wife sold those shirts. Okay, cool, hook 'em. Do you see those?
Good for her. Make a buck.
If they win, just see how embarrassed. Like I said, Texas lost to Maryland. Even if they beat Oklahoma twice, they're not going to make the playoffs. Because you can say, well, they really want Texas in. Texas has 3 losses. Texas is on that top tier with the Michigans, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Alabama. Michigan has 1 less loss. They'll take either of those schools. So I don't think they're licking their chops to get one of them back in. And Oklahoma's not on that tier. They're not in a big populous state. Unfortunately, they have the history. I liken it to USC. There were rumors that James Franklin was going to go to USC. Lynn Swann came out so far, it's still early, and said that they're sticking with Clay Helton. And right now, USC, what's going to happen to them? They're not a big enough brand by themselves to stay in the news headline. If you remember the Brady Hoke years, Michigan was always in the news even when they were losing. Ohio State is always in the news no matter what they're doing. If it's a scandal,
just got to win. Just got to win. Winning made Texas relevant again.
Well, Texas always has the population of their state, and it's a football crazy state, and however many teams hate them. USC, they're kind of all on their own, and just based on their location. So if they're really going to stick with this 4-team playoff, that is where the Big 12 looks at UCF, and I would keep going with Cincinnati just to help West Virginia out a little bit for travel, and say, UCF, you really want to play with the big boys? You're going to kind of be on an island all your own, but we need to get West Virginia some help, and we need a 12th member. Will you be in? And they're going to say, yeah. And then what happens? The Big 12 has a regular division winner. They versus another regular division winner. They have a championship game. And now you're setting yourself up to be in the playoff where this year would be UCF versus Oklahoma or whatever. The winner gets in. You're not playing 3-loss Texas. So I don't know. I think that's where the playoffs are going to go, or it expands. I don't know when the television contract's up. Some people said that it's impossible to expand it early. I think that is complete, total bullshit. Remember the NCAA said that with one and dones? And then all of a sudden they're like, you know what? We're going to look at it this year because they had so much heat. That's my other thing that they're going to look at is, can they expand the playoffs? I was against 8, but looking at the 8 right now, it would be set. Barring an upset, the 8 teams, wait, Michigan's 7, right? So UCF is 8. Those 8 teams would be in the playoffs because everyone else has 3 losses. I think, so if you go to 8 and you don't include conference champions, the playoffs are already set this year. So that's why all the people that say, well, you can't include conference champions, Northwestern could get in. Who cares? Ohio State would still have that head-to-head bid. Then you have some type of controversy. Who gets the at-large, Michigan or Ohio State? Now, if you don't have automatic bids and you go to 8, it's already set because no one is going to touch those 8 schools right now. If you look at the playoffs, because look, you have Alabama's undefeated, Clemson's undefeated, Notre Dame's undefeated, they're already done. Even if Alabama or Clemson lose their game, they're only going to have 1 loss, they're in. Georgia has 1 loss, Oklahoma has 1 loss, Ohio State has 1 loss. Even if they lose their championship game, they end up with 2 losses. They're not going to jump behind 3-loss Florida, and you have your playoff. There's no reason to play these games if you don't have automatic bids. That's my final point. I mean, the playoffs would already be set. All these championship games would mean is a little reshuffling for seeding purposes. That's why I think if they expand, go with automatic conference bids. Who cares? I would love to see Northwestern. Do you think people turned off the NCAA tournament when UMBC beat Virginia, the 1 seed? Hell no. It's basketball. Everyone loves an upset. Everyone loves an underdog. The way the playoffs are right now, there are no underdogs. They're looking for ways to get the big dogs in. UCF will not get in. And that's my final thought for the day. Matt, you have anything for the final bell? Or you can even talk about that if you want.
Yeah, my buddy Gus Malzahn down in Auburn. He's a coach that I really like, and I really love stealing stuff from his offense because I think it's truly innovative. But he might have to accept a reduced buyout from about $32 million to stay at Auburn. And I think that part of this is that there was rumors that Bob Stoops' people might have been in contact to see what was going on and to see if that was an option for him to go to Auburn. So he may have just reduced his buyout just to be willing to keep his job. And I think that's a terrible deal. He should have just said, you can either pay me, I'll coach your team next year because I'm under contract, or you can fire me and you can pay me the $32 million. I think it's a terrible move on his part. But
I didn't even see that, but go ahead.
But I give him a little bit of a tip of the cap because he's willing to stay and willing to gamble that he can win with the talent that he has there and willing to move forward with it. So kudos to him. But at the same time, the writing's on the wall. They've been trying to push out for 2 or 3 years now, and it is what it is.
I'll say I don't think he goes to Auburn. Why would Stoops leave Oklahoma on top of the world to go be Nick Saban's bitch? I think the only way Bob Stoops gets back into coaching is if Kirk Ferentz retires and he goes back to his alma mater at Iowa. That's my personal opinion. I think because I think all his brothers played at Iowa. I could see him getting the band back together and the AD there just being like, bring all the Stoops in. Let's go. And it's like the big family band back like at Oklahoma. I don't think Auburn would let him do that. And for some reason, Oklahoma didn't like him doing that after a while, probably because of all the defensive stuff. I could see him going to Iowa, but I don't think he'll go to Auburn. But speaking of coach moves, real quick, I don't even know how long we went, but Mac Brown, back at UNC. Rumors are he's trying to get other fired coaches. Speaking of Auburn, Gene Chizik, the same Gene Chizik that had Chizik coins at Iowa State. Classic. They gave out commemorative coins after he got his first couple wins or something. If you type in Google Chizik coins, you'll see what I'm talking about. And he's also been trying to get Cliff Kingsbury. That's the rumor.
Well, Cliff, I think, is going to end up in the NFL before it's all said and done. With what he did at Texas Tech, I think seeing that
Mahomes,
Kansas City and with Chicago and those teams having success, I think he's going to be a hot commodity, and I wouldn't be surprised if he jumps to the NFL.
It's like all these old coaches are coming out of retirement. Mac Brown, Les Miles, Herm Edwards last year. It's going to be like the strangest college football season. You can even count Lovie Smith at Illinois. Who's next? Steve Spurrier going back to Duke. I had to take over for Cutcliffe. I mean, he's not going to be able to do commercials with Les Miles anymore. So, I don't know. big week. Go Pitt. That's all I have. Anything else, Matt?
That's it.
I did get the video improved this week, but my other cable died. I have had the worst luck. Not feeling good. Cable's breaking. So did a test run. My video was at improved, so you can kind of see the increase in quality. But I got to get Matt up on the big screen to my right so that we can hopefully start to show some little clips and stats and stuff during the show and help improve the show. So things to look for. Hey, tell your friends. We'll be back next week, hopefully celebrating a Pitt win and definitely a Steelers win because they need it, and my fantasy football win. So thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.